Hi everyone, how are we doing today?
Good.
I'm the portfolio manager at the tech transfer office here at the university, commonly referred to as the technology and venture commercialization office. So I'm here to tell you guys a little bit about the resources that are here on campus, not only through our office, but also the Natan Institute, and to tell you a little bit about our process and how we go about commercializing technologies. I know it's a really small class, so throughout this, feel free to stop me at any given point in time. I'd definitely prefer it to be more interactive than just me standing up here and talking, and it could be that I'm skipping over some important things, so by all means, feel free to jump in at any point in time. Just out of curiosity, is everybody an undergrad, or do we have grad students in the room also? What about both? Okie doke. So yeah, as I said, I'll be talking about the commercialization resources here at the University of Utah. I'm going to start with my office, the TVC initially, then we'll jump into the Natan Institute, and then I'll talk about a few other things that I'm aware of on campus. So we call our commercialization process the commercialization engine, and we break it into three sections: the two-stroke, the four-cylinder, and the V8. We're constantly refining this process, trying to make it streamlined, but sometimes we have to improvise in the middle, as there are different scenarios that pop up with each invention, as all inventions are a little bit different. Sorry that the slide deck doesn't fit the screen so much. So in the two-stroke, it's really our intake and evaluation. Whenever a faculty member here at the university contacts us, tells us, hey, I have an invention, and I think there's an opportunity to get it to the market and generate some revenue off of it, and also get a patent. After the evaluation process, if we accept an invention disclosure, and I'll go into detail in a moment about when we accept invention disclosures, it'll move into the four-cylinder process. In the four-cylinder process, it's when we're determining if it's a licensing play to an existing company, or if we're going to build a startup around it and spin it out of the university. The University of Utah is a very startup-oriented entity. We're very interested in having impact, and that's the vehicle that we've seen the most success to getting some of these technologies to market. But at the same time, if there's an established company and they're interested in the technology, we're more than happy to allow them to take the lead and license that technology to them. On average, every year we get around 200 new technologies disclosed to us, so there's always new things coming in the door, and obviously creating 200 startups would be a little bit difficult. If within the four-cylinder process we determine that there is a startup opportunity, that's when it moves into the V8 phase, and from there it'll spin out of the university, and later on in the presentation I'll talk about what happens when it is a startup. So when an inventor here at the university discloses a technology to us, there's three important components that we look at. Can we protect it? Is there a market? And what is the value proposition? For the value proposition, we need to know why is anybody going to care, and where is the technology at? Because industries are so different. The stage of development is crucial, especially with the early on research. A lot of companies nowadays don't like to take the risk to develop the technologies, and they will just wait until a company is formed, and then the product's on the market and they'll acquire it. So after we look at the value proposition, we understand the technology, the features, where it's at in its process. We make sure that it's past the proof of concept stage, and then that's the initial trigger to us allowing a technology to move forward. If there isn't proof of concept yet, then there's funding mechanisms through the Vice President of Research's office, and because we're focused on commercialization, we need them the faculty to get to that stage at a minimum. Then we look at the IP. Can I protect it? If the university can't protect the technology, then we really can't do too much with it. There's always something called know-how, but we'll talk about patents also in a short moment. But the university needs something that it can go out and license to somebody. Otherwise, they can just do it on their own, and we would not be able to capitalize on the opportunity. So are you guys familiar with patents and in that world and what is or what is not protectable? All right. So first, and a very big thing to know is before 2011, the United States was a first to invent. So if you had come up with an invention, you jotted it down in your notebook and you dated it and you signed it, you didn't have to go to the US Patent Office until you were ready because you were the first to invent. At the time, it was still recommended to go sooner rather than later so that you wouldn't have to deal with suing other people and trying to prove that you were the first to invent, because anytime you come with a claim of that nature, the onus is on you to prove that you were the first to invent. But in 2011, the United States jumped on board with what I believe is the majority of the world, and we became a first-to-file country. So it is extremely crucial, especially in certain industries, to make sure that you get your patent in with the USPTO. You especially want to make sure you're doing that before any public disclosures. Public disclosures technically could be you talking to a friend of yours over coffee and telling him about the technology. The important thing, the important difference there is you can talk about the technology, but as long as it's not enabling. You don't want to enable that individual to know really how it works. If I talk to somebody, hey, I'm inventing this driverless car, but I'm not telling them how I'm doing it or what my code looks like or what processes I'm going to make that car work, that's not an enabling disclosure, so you're allowed to broadly speak about the technology without it becoming a public disclosure. That said, it's always better to have something on file and remove that risk completely. So before you do go and file, you want to do what's called a prior art search. You want to get an understanding of what else is out there in the public domain to see if your invention meets 3 criteria that the U.S. Patent Office looks for. It has to have usefulness to it. It needs to have a utility. Somebody needs to be able to benefit from that. It's usually, in my 2 years here at the university, I haven't had any applications that came back from a rejection on the utility. There's usually always a usefulness. But the 2 real big things is it novel, and is it non-obvious to one of ordinary skill in the art? So to answer the novelty question, when you did that prior art search, you looked at all the publications that are out there, you believe nobody's talked about an invention like this in the past, and that technically checks off the novelty box. In regards to non-obvious, it needs to be non-obvious to somebody of ordinary skill in the art to come up with a solution just like yours. A good way to make that claim is if you did experiments in the lab and they failed, but you expected a certain result, and then you tried something else and you weren't expecting it to work, and that worked. Because you guys are of ordinary skill in the art, and you tried something that you thought would work, obviously it didn't work, so that's a good way to claim something is non-obvious. In addition to that, if you find any publication that somebody teaches the opposite of what you guys are trying to claim, if they're completely contradicting your belief and you can prove that you're making it work, then that's another thing that you can go to the U.S. Patent Office if they do provide a rejection on obviousness and overcome it. That's it. Yeah, go ahead.
How, obviously a lot of inventions are similar to ones that already exist. How much difference is required for it to be novel?
That's a tough question, a good question. You can make improvements to technologies. So if there is something that's out there, so a patent will last for 20 years. So if the patent is expired and you're just building an improvement on that, if it's a spring-loaded device, let's say, and you're going to remove that spring-loaded device and put in a small chip or some type of sensor that triggers a different embodiment to make that force, then you can do that on top of what's out there. But if that patent hasn't expired and you're just trying to add an improvement, you'll still need to go to the company that owns that patent and say, hey, you can get the patent on the improvement, but in order to practice, you'll still need rights to their patent and their technology. And a little bit later in the presentation, there's a little bit about that. So even if you do your prior art search, and even if you go to a law firm and have them do the prior art search for you, that doesn't mean that we've uncovered everything and that there's nothing else out there. Even if it's a professionally trained attorney, especially in a global world like today, sometimes there's things hidden in foreign countries that need to be translated and so forth. So and there's a lot of literature out there, so you can, I would go into the process expecting to get some type of prior art that comes back. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to kill your idea. You just need to know, you just need to look at that prior art that might come to your attention and explain why your invention is different than that invention, or potentially just modify what you're trying to claim in the process. And then just again highlighting, be careful of disclosing your inventions. I don't want to jump ahead, but if you do, we'll touch on it later, what happens if you disclose and what rights you still have. So again, a public disclosure, the terms kind of describe itself, but really always be thinking about it. Is this or is this not a public disclosure? Be as critical of yourselves that you can, even if you're just sending an abstract to some journal or a conference that you're going to present at. It's always better to be safe than sorry, and there's a relatively easy process to submitting to the USPTO that's relatively affordable in order to prevent any future disclosures from actually happening. But just to kind of recap, it can be a presentation, a seminar, a poster, a conversation with a friend that could potentially be considered a public disclosure. And though it might not be, it might not seem like that big of a deal, if your invention is going up against a big company that has a lot of resources in its back pocket, and you're threatening a certain business that they have going on, they're going to do everything in their power to invalidate your patent if it was issued. And there's plenty of examples that 10 years later down the road from the first disclosure, somebody found something, was able to invalidate it. An example I recently heard from one of the law firms that we use for some of these services is a hospital was testing out a new medical device, and they still hadn't filed for full protection on the technology. And whoever was challenging the issued patent was able to find out that the room that the procedure or the testing was happening in wasn't fully locked down, and because a nurse was able to enter the room and leave it, that even though they didn't talk to her about the invention, nothing, but she was just there in the room while unfiled stuff was happening, they were able to invalidate that patent. How they found that out about the nurse and so forth, I'm not sure, but there's crazy stories out there. And again, the point I'm trying to get across is just making sure that you get something on file. One way to prevent a public disclosure from happening is to get what is called a confidential disclosure agreement in place or a non-confidential disclosure agreement in place. It's the same thing, just different terms that are used. It's a 1 to 2 page document that just says, hey, everything we're going to be talking about, we're going to keep confidential. We're not going to share it beyond those individuals within our organization that need to know about it. And it defines the amount of years you're allowed to use the information you found out, how long you have to stay confidential, potential non-compete with other companies that you might want to go under CDAs with if it's in the same realm, and it defines what you are and are not allowed to do with that information. And And as long, our standard template here at the TVC, as long as that is in place, even if we don't have anything filed with the USPTO, we still retain international rights, and it's not considered a public disclosure. So when is a good time to file? So as I mentioned, earlier is always better. When you file your application, you still have 12 months from that date to do a lot of different things. So you can abandon that application if you want and file a new application. But if you're interested in retaining your rights, again, getting something on file sooner rather than later is always better. If you forget, or sometimes our faculty members are really busy and they don't get around to it, or just didn't really recognize within the moment that there is commercial value or something to try and obtain protection on. So if there is a public disclosure, you still have up to 1 year from that public disclosure to file your patent application in the United States. That said, you'll lose international rights immediately. There's no possibility of filing in any foreign countries after that public disclosure. And then if you made a public disclosure and then didn't file anything for a year, you've pretty much lost all of your rights to that technology as far as obtaining the patent. And that information technically is now in the public domain, so it could come back and haunt you later on. It does happen on a relatively regular basis that some of the prior art that comes back to us for some of our submissions or publications that our inventors did a number of years before that. So there's 4 different types of protection that you can get, intellectual property for that matter. A trade secret's interesting. So can anybody think of any examples of maybe a trade secret that's very very known? Kind of comes up, you know? So Coca-Cola, for example, their secret recipe for their beverage is a trade secret, and only a select few know how to make the official Coca-Cola. With a trade secret, it's not only just being secret about it. There are certain documentation that need to go and be put into place, not only with the individuals that you're sharing that information with, but internally and within the company, in order for that entity to have a claim to the fact that something was a trade secret. One of the benefits of doing a trade secret is, as I mentioned earlier, a patent will only last 20 years. So if this is the next and greatest thing and you want to try and retain it for as long as possible, and you feel that nobody else can reverse engineer it or is going to come about it, then a trade secret is a great thing. Then we have trademarks, which is McDonald's, again, Coca-Cola, Apple. It's securing rights to your brand and preventing other people from using your name or your symbol to try and sell products that your company actually didn't make. And then really where our office operates a lot is copyrights and patents. Copyrights is any form of artistic expression, songs, music, programming codes, any artistic expression, essentially, as you see on the screen, with a Harry Potter book and so forth. And copyrights last, I believe, up to 100 years, and then you can actually ask for certain extensions on copyrights and trademarks, but that's so far down the line that I really actually don't have too much expertise in what happened at that phase. As far as, and then patents. So with patents, there's a few different types of patents. You have a device patent, which is the strongest type of patent out there. You have a method patent, which would be the second strongest in that line. Sometimes with method patents, it gets pretty interesting when you go overseas, as in Europe, for example, you cannot get protection on a method of curing somebody from a disease because they don't want entities to have that monopoly when it comes to people's health. So every country is a little bit different in regards to their patent laws and so forth, and the global patent organizations are working to really make it unified across the board, but those things tend to take very long periods of time, and hopefully it'll get easier as years come to just make it uniform globally. And then you can get a design patent as well. Design patents aren't that strong. In certain cases they are. So you've heard that Apple and Samsung have been suing each other for many years on the design of the smartphone. I think Apple ended up winning, and they got like $1 billion. And for those guys, it's just the cost of doing business, because I think Apple's sitting on $180 billion or something like that. But sometimes the design patent is crucial, especially if it's for the usability of the device. But here at the university, actually very rarely do we file design patents, if ever at all. It's very, very rarely. Questions in the meantime?
Question.
Yeah.
To that last slide, trademarks aren't protected from unauthorized use?
They are. If you came up with the name water bottle, let's just say, and nobody's ever used the term water bottle. If you put it on a poster and then on the top right you just do 2 small letters TM, then that's technically you claiming, okay, I'm trademarking this name. Nobody's ever used this name. I'm going to trademark it, and you need to go to the USPTO and actually officially file it. But as soon as you put the TM on the top corner of it, then you've essentially for yourself said, okay, nobody else can use this name for this area of use, and because there's still companies that use the term Apple, but you just can't use the term Apple and the symbol as it relates to computers and hardwares and probably music and so forth. So it provides, once you filed it, it provides you that protection so that somebody else can't come in and use that same brand to sell their own stuff. So as far as the patent timeline, one, it's important to mention it is extremely expensive. If you're only filing in the U.S., sometimes it can exceed $50,000 until you get issuance. And once you go into foreign countries, your money really starts disappearing pretty rapidly. But if you can find the investment to protect the technology and you are issued the patent, it can be fruitful. So if you look to the top left of the screen, our timeline is we get the invention disclosure. As long as there's no expected public disclosures, we do our review process. And if it's usable, if the prior art doesn't look too damaging, and if there's a market, we'll file. We'll file what's called a provisional application. A provisional application is just your marker with the USPTO. It says, hey, I have an invention, I'm putting my placeholder, it's the first to file rules these days, and then that triggers a 12-month process where you can make iterations and change your claims and go back to the lab and work on things and add more content to the application. And then at the 12-month mark, you convert it to a non-provisional application, sometimes referred to as a utility application. And that is also when you need to decide if you're going to file a PCT. A PCT is the option to file that application in foreign countries. And from the moment you do that, you still have additional time to decide which specific countries you want to file in. We usually do it within 6 months after we convert. We decide which countries to file in. But again, there's some outliers like Taiwan and a few countries in Africa and so forth, that the exact time frame by which you need to say I'm going to file in that country is a little bit different. But essentially, you can wait up to 30 months from that initial file date of the provisional to decide which countries you want to file. And then 18 months into the process, if you've converted in the United States, you'll get your first communication back from the USPTO, where they'll say everything looks good, the patent is issued. In reality, that never happens. You'll always get at least one office action back. But you'll get an office action. Either they say this is too broad of a claim. They could say there's 2 inventions in one application. You need to split them apart. They could uncover prior art that you weren't aware of, etc. And again, the patent process is extremely long. Usually a patent being issued is 3 to 5 years, but I actually just had a case that it took it 10 years to issue. And when it takes that long, especially considering that there's 20 years of life from the date of filing, suddenly you spend all this money and you only have 10 years left. There are ways to ask for extensions when the process takes that long, but again, that's more cost and so forth. And then the next important thing about patents is to remember that or to know that you can get a patent issued, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you've added value to yourself or to your company or to your invention. One reason is in the patent application you're making claims to what is novel and what you get the monopoly for 20 years on. And as you're going through this process and the technology is changing, suddenly you develop a product, and if those features and so forth don't correlate with whatever you're claiming, then you'll get issued claims on something that you ended up not even developing. Another reason why it might not be beneficial is it could very well just not work. So as this individual, probably one of the first skydivers out there, invented a parachute, filed for protection on it, jumped off the Eiffel Tower, didn't work. 1912, that probably didn't end too well for this guy. So, and then also, another reason why it's touching on the question from earlier, if somebody else has a patent and that is an active patent and you're depending on what they're claiming, just because you got a patent on a certain component within this entire device doesn't mean that you can go out and make that product. Yeah.
Do you have to have a patent before you can start marketing and selling your product?
No. So sometimes, and even on water bottles, if you flip it upside down, it'll say patent pending. So there's a law. So no, you don't need to have it. You don't need to have it issued in order to sell your product. There could be regulatory hurdles that you need to go through to get it approved to be sold, but from a marketing perspective or anything like that, you can just send it out there. And I would assume, so if you do get a patent and somebody's infringing on it, by the fact that you have a patent doesn't block them from actually practicing what you have a patent on. It doesn't, there is no patent police that goes out that will stop them from doing it. The burden is on the patent holder, and I would assume that sometimes they put the patent pending just to deter people from trying copying it, so that later down the road they don't have to go and give them a notice that they're infringing and deal with all of that. But which also, again, just going back to the previous slide, and when you're deciding which foreign countries to go to, if you say, well, I need this in 10 countries because it's a semiconductor technology, and there's Taiwan, Korea, China, Japan, Germany, Singapore, they're all making chips on you to protect in all these countries. Well, sometimes there's like a give and take, and you need to just also make sure that it makes business sense to file in all those countries, because it's extremely hard. Again, the onus would be on you to go to those countries and find who's infringing on you and go through the processes within those countries to stop it from happening. And a lot of times people will just settle outside of court, because when somebody's infringing on you, you can kind of already know that it's going to be between $1 million and $3 million to stop them from practicing it. So there really has to be a strategy behind why you're filing in each of the countries that you decide to file in. Coincidentally, just earlier this week, I read an article about the fact that people who are launching crowdfunding and Kickstarter campaigns, their products are being sold in Southeast Asia before they even finish their crowdfunding campaign, because people over there in the manufacturing capabilities they're looking for new things to sell, and they go online, they see this great idea, and they're like, all right, we can make this within a month, and then they just start selling it. It might not be that great and so forth, but I just thought it was a very interesting article how quickly some people are moving on other people's ideas. So once we've decided if we should protect it, the third area that we looked at is the market. It's important to be as critical as possible of the true market that you have. Your technology or your product probably is not going to address every single piece of a specific market. So for example, let's take driverless cars again for one example. If you are developing a camera for that driverless car and you go online and you do driverless car market 2025, it's going to show you that it's like $100 billion, but is that really your market? No, that's the entire market. That's everything from the sales of those driverless cars to the doors, the radios, the software that's incorporated into it. It's the everything that's in that entire industry sometimes will come up as a number, and then when you go in, you're like, well, it's a $3 billion industry. I'm going to make so much money if I just capture 1/10% of this small pie. I'll be a millionaire. But again, it's super critical to be realistic and be your own devil's advocate. And sometimes people will do what's called a top-down approach, which is what I just said, where you're saying what's the size of the car market, and then they throw out this large number to get investors really excited. But in reality, you want to do what's called a bottoms up. So you want to say how many cameras are going to be in each car. And at what price point is that camera going to sell to the car manufacturers? How many cars are going to be sold in a given year? How many different cameras are there on the market that could potentially replace or substitute your camera? Because not all car companies are going to be buying the same exact camera for all autonomous cars. And really doing those calculations to get a true feeling for what that's going to be. Because again, your part of the market is not the $30,000 per car; it's the $100 to $1,000 per camera you put into a car. And then also, that is extremely valuable for when you're doing projections, so that you know how your company is going to grow. It is looking at Tesla, for example. Tesla sells 50 to 60,000 cars a year today. And they're claiming that they're going to go from that production level up to, I think it's like 250,000 or 500,000 by 2018. And personally, I think that's lofty, because to make that scalability happen, there's a lot of infrastructure and whatnot that needs to be put into it. So you really want to make sure that your projections are also in line with how fast your company can grow. And it's really analyzing it from that bottom-up approach, where you can make realistic assumptions of how much of the entire market within your target market section can you capture for your company and your technology. So once the technology is useful, it's protectable potentially, and there is a market, what do we do? So we try, specifically here at the university, because the technologies are so early, if one of those three components doesn't exist, we don't just go back to the faculty member and tell them no. We tell them no because X, Y, and Z. And if you can do A, B, C, come back to us and we'll iterate and do the prior art search again, or reevaluate the market. Many times the technologies that are being developed can be applied in many different areas, and not just for the area that it's being developed for. And based off of, if we move the technology forward, we give it a priority of high, and that means it moves into our 4-cylinder process. If we need to do more work, if we need to iterate or try a different angle because we found some damaging aspects to the invention, then we'll put it in a medium priority tech, and we'll follow up with the inventor 6 months later and get updates as we can. And then if there's no IP, there's no market, there's no way to see that it happens, we mark it as a low priority tech, and we actually go back to the faculty member and offer to assign the rights to that invention back to them. It's important to point out that the university's intellectual property policy defines what they own, and as long as what you're working on is within your domain of expertise for which the university brought you on board, they own that intellectual property, though the faculty member will always be listed as an inventor on it. And as undergrad students, if you are using facilities that aren't readily available for other students on campus or are not part of your just regular classroom, the university technically also has rights to your portion of that invention. And then for grad and PhD students, if you're working in the lab with a faculty member and so forth, in most cases, the university owns that intellectual property. It's not because we're trying to snatch everything up. It's just in order for us to build these buildings and attract good talent, it's across the board for all universities, the universities, and even employers when you go out into the world. If you're working for Black Diamond for sporting goods or a chip design company or whatever it may be, those companies will retain that intellectual property because they're paying your salaries, the facilities, and so forth. And if you just do U of U, if you guys are interested in reading what the university policy is, if you do U of U 7-002 IP policy, it comes right up. The short, quick, and broad of it is that faculty members get between 33 and I think it's 38% of any royalties that come in as a result of that invention, and basically depending on how much money that percentage changes. As mentioned earlier, we get 200 technologies a year. So to quote Tim Cook, who at a recent presentation that he did, I heard him say that Apple needs to say no to great ideas every single day. There's always great ideas, there's always something new cooking, there's new industries popping up, and we really need to do our best to be critical of ourselves and say what's lofty and what's realistic and what are the best opportunities to pursue. And if you go out and you ask the investment community, investors usually invest in people, not in technologies, and sometimes not even in markets. It's who's going to go out and execute on strategy and use their judgment to the best of their ability in getting to market, whether that's making smart decisions on the IP and in what countries you're going to file, the partnerships that you're working on, the contracts that you're doing, the manufacturers that you're working with, and so forth. So yeah, if the technology moves forward, we move into the 4-cylinder process, and what we do in the 4-cylinder process is really primary research. So when we're doing our research in the first phase, it's secondary information that we're finding online. So we actually pick up the phone, we get out of the office, and we ask the hard questions, even the ones that we believe we know. We don't want to drink our own Kool-Aid. We go out into industry. We talk to the people who are potential licensees, the potential end users of that product that we're developing, and really making sure that whatever we're working on in the lab is in line with what the end user, the customers, the purchasers, the licensees will want out of that, so that we're not wasting money and going down a long road that never ends. And through this primary research, that's really where we discover, is it a licensing play or is it a startup? So we have a technology, for example, it's a pressure sensor stent. 60% of individuals who have stents are asymptomatic, so you can't detect restenosis, which is buildup of plaque around your stent. And we heard about this issue of restenosis from a surgeon here at the university. And there's some drug-eluting stents and so forth that are out there, but we went out and we talked to the big companies that are in the stent market, and the feedback that we got was, one, it's going to be extremely difficult to be competitive as a startup because there's so many companies out there with distribution channels, expertise, patents, et cetera, and they told us, if you guys can get it to this point, a certain point that they defined for us in the development stage, we'll take it and we'll put it through the whole FDA process. We'll get regulatory approval. We'll do the clinical trials, and that in and of itself can cost $1 million to $2 million. So when we're out there and we're trying to figure out, is it a licensing play? Is it a startup? It's usually in the 4-cylinder. When it is a startup, what our office does is we'll bring in management. A lot of the time the faculty members are more of a CTO than a CEO, never raise money, stuff like that. We want to make sure that there's a strong team in place that can, again, execute and get to market. We have funding accelerators. So for those individuals who have a little bit less experience, it's a 7-week program. Where each week you come in, you give your pitch to an active investor in the Valley, and they give you feedback. The ideal situation is they like the opportunity and they open up their checkbook or call a friend or refer us to somebody else, but it's a program in order to get the teams ready to go out and do fundraising. We'll make introductions and help with the formation of the company, whether they want to if they just need a contact to an attorney that can help them do all the registration of the company and so forth. We'll do that. Engine funding, we retain some of our own earnings in order to put it back into technologies. This is actually a mechanism that Rajesh Manan has used. As you guys may know, Rajesh is very commercialization minded, and he discloses a lot to our office. I work with him on a lot of different projects. He's involved in startups and so forth, so make sure to get as much as you can out of this class if the entrepreneurial world is of interest to you, because he definitely understands both sides of the coin when it comes to business and technology. And we have other programs such as the Lean Canvas cohort, which builds on the business model canvas, which I understand is a requirement for this class. And I'll touch on that in just one second, but just to kind of finish off our third phase, we're really a very hands-on entity. For the last decade, we've spun out between 15 to 18 startups every single year. Today, I think over 40% of those startups are still with their doors open. And this past year was the only year that we kind of dipped down, where we created 7 startups. And the reason the number decreased was because we've been incubating technologies a little bit longer in order to give them a better runway to spin out of the university, but I think we're already at about 5 this year, so we should be back up to that large number. And if you go around the country and you look at tech transfer offices, we're really lucky to be here at the U in the sense that the higher ups at the university are very interested in having an impact and making sure that the research gets into the hands of individuals so that it can benefit society. And I'm in a great position in my office because I can provide really friendly terms and help these technologies move along, and I don't have to think about profit first. It is great to make a profit because you got to keep your lights on, and even in a large institution like the university, every department has its budgets and how much is coming in, how much is going out, and we got to make sure, just like every other business, that we can balance that. But from my experience and what I've seen, not many tech transfer offices throughout the country are very hands-on in this nature and provide so many resources to faculty members Usually it's just a 1, 2, maybe 3-person office that might file like 5 patent applications a year, and they just sit there and they wait till somebody comes knocking and says, hey, I want to take a license to that, and it's really just, they're not profitable, and they just roll with the punches. And having these services here at the university, I've repeatedly heard, is one of the reasons we've been able to attract such great faculty members in the last 5, 7, 10 years. And we compete with Stanford, MIT, Wharf over in Madison, Wisconsin, UPenn. We're really top office in the tech transfer landscape. So just jumping from our what we provide in our third phase of the commercialization engine, which once that is complete, and technically it's called complete when the startup spins out of the university, they have their own office space, registered business, and things are going good. But I did want to highlight the business model canvas that is a part of this course, and it's something that we've been using, I think, for over 6 months now, probably a year. The interesting thing about this is that it was initially created as a tool by an individual named Steve Blank out of the Bay Area. He has a big book called the Startup Manual, which has received a lot of accolades in the entrepreneurial community. And the NSF actually uses this tool today in their I-Corps program in order to determine what research they're going to fund and what they're not going to fund. In the past, they would just give money to research because it was cool research, but they also want to make sure that there's some type of return, because otherwise that funding will dry up. And they require a lot of the applicants to go through this program to make sure that they have a path forward once the research is done into commercialization, and that there's a business in mind, there's a business model, they know how it's going to be self-sustaining and how we're going to actually capture value out of that research, aside from publishing papers, which do carry a lot of value. That's not to say that they don't, but in order for these things to be sustainable, the NSF uses this tool. And basically, I consider this a business discovery tool. It really gives you a full like a 30,000-foot view of your business. And the way that it's broken up into the 9 building blocks of business: customer segment, value prop, the channels, the resources, what are the activities you need to do, how much is it going to cost you, and what is the revenue. And when you start off on this project, you fill in all of your assumptions. You say, okay, who is my customer? And going back to the camera for driverless cars, is your customer the guy that's buying the car, or is it the director of technology at Google, Tesla, Nissan, BMW, wherever it may be? What are your channels to getting that camera to that car company? Is it through trade shows? Is it through your LinkedIn network? Is it through small sales initially for a completely different market and then marketing to those companies? And basically you give this one shot, you fill it all out, you write in all of your assumptions of what you think it's going to cost, where your revenue streams are going to come from, you fill in everything. And then you leave the office, you leave the campus, and you go out and you start interviewing people, and you ask them questions that are going to test the hypotheses that you put into this template. And as you're interviewing them, and if you read the book, and there's a lot of material online how to do it, you want to make sure that you're not leading the suspect, if you will, to the answer that you want to hear. You want to ask roundabout questions that will really pull true value out of what you're trying to find out, because if you're not going about it right, you're going to get biased answers that aren't truly going to show you the business landscape and the opportunity that you have. And as you're getting this feedback, if you said, okay, my customer is the end user, it is the person that's buying the car because they want a great camera and they want the best driverless capabilities and they're going to be demanding this camera, you're going to go out and you're going to talk to 2 or 3 people and you're going to pretty quickly through the process realize they're not your end customer, and you scratch those individuals out, and then you put in your next assumption, and then you keep doing that until you have confirmed through a certain sample size of interviews, and at a point that you feel comfortable with, that you've identified who that customer is. Same thing with the value proposition. And there's a sequence to going through these. Can't remember all of them offhand, but I know that you start with the customer segment. Once you've identified your customer, you say, what's the value prop? And then once you know what's valuable to that customer, then you're removing things that you thought were important previously, and you're adding other things. Because again, you don't want to spend a lot of money building features that nobody cares about. And it's really those customer interviews and getting out of the office that answer those things for you. So we require that, well, I wouldn't say require, but we encourage all of our high priority techs to go through this process. We've not only completely killed technologies because we found out that there is no market for it, but at the same time we've completely pivoted and gone to completely different markets that some of our teams have been working on for 2 years, because they've using this tool, they finally realized I've been approaching the wrong market. So if you don't, if you're not a faculty member, you're on campus, you're in these great classes, you're really excited about entrepreneurship, it's a great place to be a student at, for if you're interested in entrepreneurial activities. So though, before jumping into the Natan Center, though our office's mission is to provide services to the faculty here on campus, there are options to spin in a technology that you might be working on. But before you do that, and I'll tell you exactly how you spin in a technology after a couple more slides, we recommend going to the Natan Institute. Troy D'Ambrosio, the head of the Natan Institute, awesome guy. He works with students across the board. I dare say that the Natan Center does for students what we do for faculty. The services are a little bit different, but they're really here to help students commercialize technologies, create startups, and we're here for the faculty. So some of the programs that they have, one is the Utah Entrepreneur Challenge. I think it occurs in the spring, around March time is the final, so I would assume September, October, November is when submissions and so forth initially start. It's the largest student run or student business plan competition in the state. You don't have to be only here at the university. You can be at any Utah higher institution to apply for it. It is they give out up to $40,000 in awards, I believe. Those numbers change every so often. It's been a little while since I looked at it. But it's a business plan competition. You write the business plan, you have a couple-minute pitch. And through the activity, there's all kinds of additional valuable experiences that the programs, and each of these programs, provide to the students that get engaged with them, whether that's mentorship, guidance, resources, practicing, all kinds of different things. Opportunity Quest is I believe it occurs in the fall. It's a $5,000 award that you get for putting together an executive summary. An executive summary of just 2 pages where you talk about what your business is and really try and keep it short and sweet, but to the point. I don't know all the judging criteria offhand, but if you did have an idea, just a thought, submit it to the Opportunity Quest program. If you're fortunate and you win the $5,000, it's a great head start, whether you want to print some molds, doing 3D printing, or bring on a consultant or a programmer to develop the app or whatever it may be. It gives you validation. Oh, I'm onto something here. Okay, I'm onto something. I got great feedback. Even if I didn't win, I'm going to go to the Utah Entrepreneur Challenge. I'm going to write a business model around this. I'm going to really flush out and write down on paper what I think my business idea is. I'm going to step back a second and just say that the great thing about the business model canvas, and this is true about also just a business model, is that it allows you to go back and see where you were in the past and where you've been led to up till today in regards to the vision that you once had and what is the vision today. What did you know and what do you know today? And So yeah, I would say a great opportunity is going into the Opportunity Quest and then into the Utah Entrepreneur Challenge. The university also has the Bench to Bedside Medical Device Competition. It's also around up to $40,000 in awards. They have a final event April 8th or 9th up at the state capitol. The media comes out. Really, really great competition. We actually work with some teams that were in that program. Many times students will apply to the Bench to Bedside competition as they've been working in the lab with a certain faculty member, and it's kind of an additional part of the activities that the faculty members is busy and they're going to do this and explore this business opportunity and try and get some additional funds. So in this program you'll actually see technologies that are from active research happening here at the university and not just ideas. Games for Health, another program. I know the U has a real estate development business plan competition. There's the Holt International competition for social entrepreneurship, where it's sponsored by the Clinton Foundation, and the first prize is $1 million, and every year the whole competition is based around trying to solve the global problem in some third world country. When I was a student here at the U, I actually partook in that and flew out to Boston for it, and that year it was ending food scarcity in urban slums, and it was a great experience. So besides the ones that I'm listing here, there's a lot of opportunities on campus, probably some that I'm not even aware of. And then 3 more that I'd like to highlight, that's kind of cut off on the bottom part of the screen, is the Lasan Center for grad students do a program that's a year long. It's about 10 hours a week where they pair the grad student up with a faculty member that's doing research on campus, and that grad student takes on the whole business side of the research that's being happened, and really they create teams so that the grad student can get experience in the business world and actually working with the real technology, and so that the faculty member can focus on the research, especially if they're not too interested in starting a business or commercialization. This program just started at the Lasan Institute, which opened this past fall semester, where basically if someone wants to open up a restaurant, they can go to the Lasan Institute and basically submit an application and run their restaurant idea in the Lasan building and actually sell their food and get feedback and so forth. So I know a lot of these aren't necessarily directly related to optics and energy, but it's just to give you guys a little glimpse at how much is happening on campus and how many opportunities there are. And then this little leaf here, it's actually a symbol of the Get Seated program, which the Get Seated program, I believe you guys have heard about a little bit. It happens monthly during the full-time semesters here on campus, where basically you can go and ask for funds that are with no strings attached in order to develop your technologies and get it to the next stage. You go into a room, there's a group of individuals, some of the program coordinators, some are just students that are interested in being there, some of the other individuals that will be pitching, and you basically pitch for 30 minutes. You explain the opportunity, you explain why you're there, how much money you're looking to get. I know it's not a tremendous amount of money, but they really have you focus in on what is the next stage that you're going to be in the development process or getting to market process that you need this money for, and you really need to sell the room on the fact that that next step is the most crucial one in your vision to getting to market. And I've been to those events a couple times, and I've seen that sometimes they won't actually give you the money. The university will just be like, oh, we'll do that for you. So if you say, I need to design my webpage, well, the Lasan Institute has resources, and rather than giving you cash, we're like, oh, we'll help you with that. We don't need to outsource that. So a lot of times you'll go for funds, and you'll actually just get the solution rather than money. But at the same time, I think they give out a very over the course of the year, they give out a respectable amount of capital. They just break it down into little tranches, and as the students, you can come back every single month and pitch again. If you've hit that next milestone and you've used the money the way you said you did and there's validation, you can go back and ask for more money and more money and more money. And then just real quick, I know there's a early stage venture investment entity called Kickstart in the Valley, and last year they started they put together a group of students, gave them $500,000, and those students chose the purpose of the fund was to invest in student-run companies only. I haven't seen the name or symbol or anything this year. I don't know if they've invested all the money and they decide to wait what comes from it, but yeah, again, just to highlight the amount of entrepreneurial activity happening on campus, especially at the Lasan Institute, which is for some people open 24 hours a day, but for everybody else it's 7 to 1 a.m. And some of the resources that they provide is workshops. Not all my symbols popped up. They have facilities for 3D prototyping with tools and electronics for testing and so forth. They do a program called Hours with Experts, where they bring in people from industry that you can run ideas off of and get their input and mentorship. They have a space within the building for your startup to be embedded in or have a physical location. I don't know why the other symbols didn't pop up. Sorry. They have a physical location for you to actually have a mailing address. Let's see if I'm forgetting anything else that's happening there. I have a big Internet of Things company came and gave them a lot of software. ANSYS for modeling is given free softwares. So definitely recommend going up there, talking to the people, understanding what resources are readily available there. Because just for example, if you go into the Bench to Bedside Medical Device competition, they're going to give you $500 for a 3D printing of a prototype for the competition. But you could actually just go to the Lasan Center and do it for free and use that $500 for something else. So if you're being engaged in these activities and so forth, highly recommend going up to the Lasan Center, talking to people, fully understanding all the options and resources that are up there. I think it would be extremely valuable to the endeavors that you pursue. And if you do go through some of those activities and there is validation and things are looking good and you filed your initial patent application with the U.S. Patent Office to just get your placeholder, you're like 8 months into it and you say, you know, I'm still in school, I got a lot of things going on, I need more support, I'm not an expert at IP, I don't have $30,000 to pay for it, the university has provided me everything that I can. There is the option to spin in your technology into the university. It's up to our office to decide if they want to spin it in. There's no obligation on our end to, if you say you want to, that we have to. And if you contact our office, they'll put you in touch with a manager. That manager will talk to you, ask some questions, get a feel for the opportunity, and if they feel comfortable, they'll have you fill out an official form, and then we go through our 10-week evaluation process. We'll look at the patent landscape and so forth. The worst thing that could come from it is you get a written report of our analysis of the market, the trends, the competition, the intellectual property landscape, how many companies are filing, and so forth. And if we feel confident in the spin-in, then you fall underneath the university's IP policy, which and are treated like a faculty. But you will need to assign your rights to that technology to the university, meaning the university owns the intellectual asset. Again, you're still an inventor on it, but the spin-in basically essentially turns you into what we would the terms that a faculty member operates underneath. And then also we just want to make sure, a big consideration that goes into it, and if you go through this process you'll hear it, is that we need to make sure that you guys are going to be around and working on this technology and helping driving it forward, because we don't have the resources internally to move 200 technologies a year, and we work on these things as teams with our faculty member. Real quick, because I do want to leave some time for Q&A, just some other things that I'm aware of as far as resources, the Sustainability Resource Center and the library. The Sustainability Resource Center, which is not popping up, but popped up on the previous page. Anyways, they have the SCIF fund. It stands for Student Something Initiative Fund, probably Student Campus Initiative Fund. And basically, they have funds in order, if you feel that there is a way to make campus more sustainable, they are all ears and they will fund it. So this year, especially when the smog gets really bad, somebody submitted an idea to them for masks with filtration systems on it, and they use the money to subsidize those. They have nice University of Utah SCIF symbols on it, and they cost $5. Usually they're about $30, but because the air quality is so bad, they put in, a student was like driven for whatever reason, they put in a submission, got funds for it. A number of years ago, somebody submitted an idea to put in small leaf-shaped solar panels on one of the buildings a little bit closer to the Union, using technology from a startup in New York. I think it never took off because the startup went bankrupt or something didn't work out there, but that's an example for it. Some of the bike lanes were potentially funded by this program, and I know for a fact, because I'm working with a solar thermal company to build a test project here of their panels. They actually they're going to be putting in a thermal solar system on one of the buildings, and because it reduces the cost for the university and makes it more sustainable, I think they have about $125,000 that's going towards that project to put up anywhere from 2 to 8 panels, and it involves other faculty on campus that are going to continue some of the research to help enhance that product. Sorry that slide is not up here. I'm not sure why it's not transitioning through. And then the library, a great spot to go. The folks that sit on like the first floor are more than happy to help do some prior art searches. There's an individual there named Dave Morrison, who is the head USPTO patent searching individual at the library. Very friendly guy. He does seminars every couple months or 3 on how to use the USPTO website and search for prior art. And just very pleasant guy. Loves his job. He's done some stints with the U.S. Patent Office. Very knowledgeable, and is here as a resource for students. Also, we have a lot of journals that we're subscribed to, whether it's PubMed. There's a lot of them. There's hundreds of them on the U website where you guys can go in and put in keywords and see through those journals if there's any publications and stuff that are potentially damaging to you, or might just save you a lot of time with some of the research that you want to do. And then you can always go up to the U.S. Patent Office website, search around. Google also has a website that's very functional. You can put in keywords, dates, inventors' names, companies' names, and you'll get a whole list of patents that are out there. They'll also show you what was considered potential prior art to that patent application, so you can really go down the rabbit hole and uncover a lot of material that's out there. That said, I have quite a few more slides in this deck to talk about successes, what success looks like and what failure looks like and what causes it and what doesn't, but I didn't really think that I'd have enough time to go into this slide. I think we have about 10 more minutes or so for this class session, and I just would be happy to talk to you guys, answer any questions that you have about, to the best of my capability, on the Lassonde Institute or our office, more details about the patent process, how we go about it, things to consider when you're meeting with inventors, or anything that you guys might have. Is anybody working on any inventions at the moment. I know some of you guys are going to be paired up with individuals from our office that you need to meet with them to go over your canvas and so forth. Are there any questions that might help you already in how to approach the canvas? Or personally, I'd just be curious to hear what some of the business ideas you guys have. Does the class go to till 10 up or? 52. Okay. Well, I will leave some of my cards with you guys, and if you guys have any questions that pop up, or there is a spin-in consideration or whatever, feel free to reach out to us. We also, I'd be happy to help potentially with CDAs, at least providing a draft or a resource where you can find some so that you can go out and talk to individuals, point you in the right direction for things that you might want to be doing here on campus, or getting you in touch with certain faculty member that might be able to help you in some of the research and so forth. And then, what else? I guess I'll do a little plug for my office. If you guys are looking for internship opportunities, we have between 12 and 20 interns that are working for us at any given point in time from a wide variety of backgrounds. That's actually how I first got involved with my office, and I come from the business school, but we have everything from music majors to physics to bioengineering to all kinds of backgrounds, medical school, and basically it's a 19-hour-a-week internship. It's paid. I think it's about $12 an hour with potential increases over time. But really, what the analysts do is they do all our market research in our two-stroke process. And once you've done that a little bit and are a little bit more familiar with our office, which usually takes about 2 to 3 months later, then you start doing the primary research. You work hands-on with the faculty members here on campus, and work with somebody as myself, the manager, on putting together the entire report and validating some of our assumptions. And then those opportunities can turn into, one of our interns is now going to work for a University of Utah spin-out. I think that just happened organically, not necessarily something through our office, but myself and 3 other interns have moved into full-time positions within our office over time. But again, through this opportunity, you'd be working with faculty and being exposed to a lot of what's happening here at the university. And there's no time if you come in, you can just do it over the summer for the 3 months and say that's enough, or some people stick around for 12 months. But you can find some information on our website if that's something that's interesting to you, and it really gives a great opportunity to learn more about IP and really explore much further into depth a lot of the things that I've touched on today. So yeah, just thank you guys for your time. It was great being here. And if there's any questions, feel free to follow up with us. Thanks so much.